hear feedback from is when something is said in the room and they can't hear it, if it's not repeated, they don't know what's going on either. So those are the two reasons why we have a microphone. One is so that they can hear, but also so that I don't have to repeat what you're saying and waste time doing that. Take extra time doing that, okay? So help me help you to be reminded to use the microphone, okay? All right, we'll try to do that. We'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work well, then we'll figure out something else, okay? Online? Thank you, Tom, for asking that. That's a great question. We haven't started yet, so that's okay. So you saw the attendance that was in here today, and when we take a look at over the week, because not everybody joins us for worship on Sunday morning. They're working, whatever. Maybe there's some new people who find us during the week, etc. We'll have anywhere from 80 to 100 clicks, and each click is one computer or one laptop or one iPad, whatever. But what's misleading with that is one click could represent 5 people. So, for instance, when I visit with people who aren't necessarily with us every Sunday, and I ask them, "Are you online with us?" And they'll say, "Oh yeah," and I bring 3 of my neighbors with me. And so I know this from a couple of people who are recovering in facilities or who are at home. There's a couple of people who weekly gather their neighbors together because that's what fits them best, and they're with us online. So one click can mean anywhere from one person to who knows how many. So you figure 80 to 100, that's at least 80 to 100 more people, but multiply that easily by 2 because if it's a couple, okay? So we could have anywhere from 80 to 400 online with us during the week. I don't know if you had a chance to meet Joe and her daughter today. They were in the back. Joe's parents are in a facility in Harrisonburg, but Joe lives in Maine. So she comes down once in a while to make sure her mom and dad are okay. But Joe belongs to a congregation in Maine that, one, isn't doing anything online, so that when weather gets, and it's an hour trip for her to her church, when weather gets bad, she can't make it to worship, so she's with us online all winter long, mainly all winter long. Now, as the weather's better, she just told me this, on non-communion Sundays, they're with us, and on communion Sundays, they go to their church so they can receive the supper. So, so what I found out from Joe is it's not only Joe, it's her daughter and a neighbor, and that neighbor has told another friend. So here's Maine. We're having a impact in the state of Maine. That's amazing to me. We have a campus in Maine. That's right. That's right. And I will say this too. There are conversations. Jeff and I have had this. I've had it a little bit with the district president that there are communities in our area that aren't large enough to support a full-time congregation and pastor, but they might be amenable to a campus type of ministry where we go in and we rent a storefront or maybe meet in someone's home or someplace where you can have a larger gathering of, let's say, 10 plus people. And we bring our worship to them. Maybe we have a lay deacon that's trained from our congregation so that they have at least a live person with them, but have somebody from our congregation go to these communities where we begin and we have worship with them, Bible study with them. With technology today, all you need is a projector and a blank wall, and boom, you can get everything that we experience here, there. It is good to have a live person who welcomes and interfaces and all that kind of stuff in a place. I think of a place like Montebello, across the mountain, an hour from here, where they have the donuts. Maple Festival, that's it. Had to think of donuts. Yeah, food. The Maple Festival, okay, that kind of community. Or Covington, west of here on 64. Different places even. It could be a great opportunity for us to do some kind of campus outreach in Harrisonburg with JMU, and also then begin to establish a congregation in Harrisonburg for outreach of the gospel. That would have a potential to really grow into a self-standing, self-supporting congregation. Anyway, those are opportunities for us to be thinking about, to engage in technology that many have already, many are already. Welcome to technology, to Bible study today. So, things for us to think about and pray about, consider. Yeah. One of the things that I think about for that is, okay, so we have a shortage of pastors in our church body, and it's only going to get worse. What does a congregation do that's vacant, and is going to be the average vacancy is 4 to 5 years in our synod. Yeah. Now, 4 to 5 years. One is some congregations are very hard to fill. It's their location. It's the health of the congregation. Bethany right now, as we are right now, Bethany would not be a hard congregation to fill, to find a pastor. There would be a wait. It may be a year or so, or maybe 2, but Bethany would not be a hard congregation to fill because of who we are, the health we have, the opportunities that we have. We have a preschool, etc. But thank you. I'm glad too. Thank you, David. Thank you. I'm glad I'm here too. Yeah. But what about a congregation that's got a vacancy? Well, we could go in with them and lead them in worship from what we do here, and help them through that vacancy until they do have a pastor. In fact, there's options that Jeff and I have talked about. For instance, putting together a package for a congregation. If you want us to provide this for you, then for X amount of dollars, because we want to have accountability here with one another, you buy the equipment and we will provide worship for you. And for another subscription service, we'll provide Bible study for you. And for another subscription service, we'll provide pastoral care for you once a month to celebrate the Lord's Supper. Which means that we also here need to have some of those things in place so that we can do that. But those are options for us to meet the needs of the greater church from a congregation that's healthy and thriving and has opportunities to do that for other congregations that may be in a different place than we are. This is what we in the Southeastern District are wanting to do. We're wanting to think creatively about advancing the kingdom even in these challenging times for us. One of the challenges that we have in the Southeastern District is getting church workers here. The bulk of our church workers are raised in the Midwest, and so they've got family there, and they want to stay in the Midwest. Now that we closed our East Coast Concordia down, and we don't have a Concordia college to prepare church workers who are from the East Coast, that's really hurt the East Coast, and so I'll talk about that in a minute. So how is it that a guy from South Dakota maybe has a real mission heart and loves all the things that you're hoping for in a pastor or a principal or a teacher, and someplace out here in the Southeastern District calls them to be one of those positions of service? Gosh, that's a long way from home. Grandparents want to enjoy their grandkids and et cetera. I don't know anything about the East Coast. No, I think I'm going to stay in the Midwest. I mean, that's kind of where we are right now as a church body. I wouldn't be on the East Coast if it weren't for my bride, because Sue was from the Baltimore area. Her parents were living in North Carolina when we married, so that drew me east when I was a Midwesterner. And my hope as a younger man, I wanted to go west. I wanted to go to Colorado and Montana and all. I wanted to head out west. I thought, that's where it'd be great to live. Well, here I am on the East Coast, and I love it, of course, and I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, so unless we have pulls like that, and get to know places that we're not familiar with. It's a challenge for the Southeastern District to get church workers who particularly from the Midwest. Yeah, Scott.
It makes it sound like we ought to have our daughters go and start wooing Midwesterners. Part of it's just, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but with that same mindset, we'd never have missionaries overseas. Where's the Holy Spirit leading people to His kingdom?
So,
if someone places family above the leadership of the Holy Spirit, I'm scratching my head.
well, and you should scratch your head, and we all are scratching our head, because one of the things the Council of Presidents has acknowledged is that we have lost the spiritual nature of the call process. What happens when supply and demand get offset? The old human nature sneaks in there, right? And this is what some of the younger clergy are wrestling with, is it's supply and demand. So some of these young guys have 5 calls on their desk at one time. How do you discern what the Spirit wants for you? Well, who's going to pay me the most? Who wants me the most? What perks do I? All that human nature stuff sneaks in there, and we've lost, in many ways, the aspect of the spiritual nature of the call. So, Council of Presidents is having that kind of conversation. Now, down in our district level, we as vice presidents are having that conversation with our district president. That when I have interviews to conduct part of the need there is to not just ask the questions, but to seek spiritual answers behind them, so that we can discern then in spiritual ways rather than just human nature kind of ways. So one of the things that we have done in our Southeastern District to help church workers when they are called from a Southeastern District congregation and they live in Wisconsin or they live in wherever, is we've put together a marketing like sheet. Here are all the blessings of the Southeastern District. You can be to the beach in an hour. You can be to the mountains in an hour. You can ski, that human stuff, but also the blessings that we are as a Southeastern District. We are mission focused. We are creative in thinking. We are healthy and vibrant. We are a vital part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We as a district are one of the highest financial supporters of our Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We have 33 million people in our district that need to know Jesus. Or, no, I should back up. 33 million people that live in our district borders, 50% of those, by average, need to know Jesus. So it's a great mission target. We have large cities, we have small communities, we have rural, you name it. We've got it in the Southeastern District, and lots of opportunities for people. So we've got a marketing kind of sheet that we can give to these church workers so they can know what is the Southeastern District. You know, when I lived in Iowa, and people would say the East Coast, I had this mental image of just one big slab of concrete. Lots of people, big populations, I had no idea what it was like. I just thought, oh, all it is asphalt and concrete. Until I got out here, and I said, wow, there's trees. Until I got to experience and see what it was like. Anyway, so those are things that we need to be praying about for the church here in the Southeastern District. Susan, please. Yeah, Concordia. Oh, yeah. They do. They're different. I wouldn't say they're liberal because liberal goes to politics right away. They're more diverse.
Well, diverse and open, I think,
Okay.
Open to creativity.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think it's really important to, yes, we got to get pastors from wherever, but we should make it like, I don't know even how you would do it. People need to want to go in.
They do. People, this is where the Spirit nudges then, right? People need to be open to, well, I want to go to a district that is allowing creativity within the boundaries of doctrinal truth, that allows for a great variance of worship practices, that is mission-minded, that congregations aren't all homogenous. Now, with that said, that's also a huge push among many, some within our synod, that they do want all of our congregations homogenous. We acknowledge in the Southeastern District that a congregation in York County, Pennsylvania, is going to be very different than a congregation in downtown Washington, D.C., which is very different from Fishersville, which is very different from Aiken, South Carolina. And we need that difference. If we're all going to push for homogeny, we're going to lose the mission of that community and not be able to reach those people who are there. And that's one thing that we do enjoy in the Southeastern District. And it's just a challenge in the Midwest. It's not bad, it's just a challenge because they're not dealing with Ethiopians coming from Ethiopia, who are some of them are Christian, Lutheran, and some of them are not. We have a huge opportunity to reach Ethiopians, the Hmong people from China, the Iterian people from Africa, who are making their way, who are coming here to the East Coast, and we are having opportunities to start brand new missions through these people. Awesome kind of ministry. Well, and I'll use my past congregation, and not to throw them under the bus, but in Elmore, Ohio, my first congregation, we didn't have ethnicities that we dealt with. Maybe it's changed in 30 years since I've been there, but probably not, because it's just the way it is in those kinds of communities. Okay, that's not bad. What it does, though, it takes a unique. We can be compared to Elmore, where we are lily white and don't deal with much ethnicity in our community. It takes a special emphasis then for us as congregations to be more ethnic-minded, world mission-minded. By the way, you're going to be welcoming a missionary from Cambodia and his wife on July 6th, Pastor J.P. Last name is Seema. Anyway, is it J.P. or C.J.? I should know that by now. Anyway, we're going to welcome him and to worship, and he'll be with us in Bible class and share with you the opportunity of what we might partner with him and his wife as they work in Cambodia. We just need to be more intentional about it, is what I'm getting at. Yep. Yeah, Scott.
Now, then, question about with Elka having walked off the spiritual cliff. I remember years ago when that first happened, we were still in Northern Virginia, we started seeing lots of folks coming to our congregation from Elka churches.
Yep.
Couldn't deal with
Yep.
the spiritual suicide that they do. But do we see Elka pastors coming to LCMS by colloquy? Can't deal with the spiritual impurity anymore.
Scott asks, do we have ELCA pastors coming to the Missouri Synod who coming through the process that's called colloquy? It's a unique process for a church worker from another denomination to be accepted into church work in the Missouri Synod. Do we see any of that? And if we don't, why? We do see some. In fact, the mission start in Lexington was started by a ELCA pastor that colloquized into the Missouri Synod for purposes of his own life needs, family and all, stayed in Lexington, and so then began the mission that is now in Lexington. They worship actually in a very historic Presbyterian church, sharing times, space with that congregation. Mark Schrader is his name, yep. So he was colloquized. The challenge with that is, depending on where you are in the tenure of your ministry, when you switch, for an ELCA to come to Missouri Synod, he would lose all of his retirement, his pension, those things that have been built up over time. That's a rock and a hard place. I want to be faithful to the scriptures. I want to be faithful to my calling. I've got a wife and children that I need to be responsible for. I've got a retirement that's expensive in the United States. This is the country we live in. How do I balance that? And so that has prevented, I'll say many I had a conversation with a ELCA pastor in this community who would love to be a part of the Missouri Synod, but he's between a rock and a hard place with that. Can't. Yeah. So that's the reality of this kingdom that we live in, the world kingdom that we live in. Mom.
Yeah, I come back to what Scott said about the Holy Spirit's heart and the call. I think we kind of lost a little bit of that.
We have.
A whole new generation. But an example, Gordy was serving in a parish in Iowa, a very healthy parish. But Ohio had called, they invited him to come, and a lot of times, usually, the spouse goes along. I said, no, this is, I'm not going to be any influence on you going or staying. I was teaching at the time, and I would like to have stayed, but I didn't want that influence. So he went alone, and then he came back and said, I don't know why, but the Holy Spirit wants us to go. So we went, without checking out all the other stuff.
Right,
that was
right,
original.
right.
And the other thing about you, I don't think you ended up here just because of Sue. There were a lot of things.
Oh, well, the East Coast influence. The East Coast influence.
You started out in a mission around the world. And
True,
you came back
true.
and was educated in Iowa, but then you had an LYE experience that you again went around the world. And so if you weren't just an influence.
I was not cloistered in, yeah, I had a broad, I was blessed to be given a broad worldview. Yeah,
Entered in Sue into your life,
Yep.
entered Sam's
yep,
disabilities,
yep,
and you ended up in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But that was
yeah.
all
That was all the Spirit. That's right.
And then
Yep.
somebody found out about you there at Trinity, and I mean, that's just.
It's all the Holy Spirit. When you look back, you can see it's all the Holy Spirit at work. Now, when we can't see the future, but we are moving forward, we want to keep it there, the Holy Spirit. And so we want to keep the nature of the Spirit in the call process, to acknowledge and recognize that it is of the Lord and His leading by the nudging of the Spirit, opening doors, closing doors. One of the great prayers that Sue and I have found in life, in discerning the Spirit and wanting the Spirit, asking the Spirit to work, is when we're faced with a decision, Lord, rend the roots. If we're supposed to move or change or whatever it is, you tear up those roots. You do it. But let it be so clear to us that we know that it is of you. I need a 2x4 across the head once in a while, usually. So make it clear, right? Make it clear. And we can give at least 2 accounts to when we're faced with it, having been faced with the decision, and we ask the Lord through that kind of prayer very clearly. And in fact, He answered that prayer, to bring us here. Well, thank you on your end for that. And on, yeah.
We were lucky that we had spare pastors that could fill in.
To be vacant, when you were vacant, yeah. Yep. Yep. And the Spirit provided on both fronts. I could tell you that story sometime. I won't go into it right now. But there was something I was going to mention. Anyway, yeah. Lots of times we have seen the Lord work in that way. And it's always, every single time, ended for a blessing. Come out on the other end as a blessing that because the Lord leading. Oh, this is what I'm going to say. I don't want to throw church workers totally under the bus. That'd be unfair for me. Because we're in this together. Church workers and congregations are in this together. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of congregations who don't treat their church workers fairly. I'm not one of them. Thank you very much. I'm blessed by that. And of course, it's taken some of my leadership to shape and mold, and it's taken our past to get us to where we are, but that's fine. But there are congregations who simply refuse to treat their church workers fairly. This is one of the reasons why the district has guidelines for salary, guidelines for health care, guidelines for vacation, etc. Because some congregations don't have a clue on where to start or end or begin or anything for their church workers, and they're looking for help. And when a congregation doesn't ask for help and they try to raise that up among themselves, and for instance, you've got a congregation where you've got a bunch of people on the call committee who, for lack of better opportunity, are a bunch of, let's say, 82-year-olds, okay? It's been 20 years since it's been 20 years since they retired, and it's been 50, 60 years since they began work. And they'll say, well, when I began, this is 60 years ago, I was paid X amount of dollars. You know, that's not fair. In 2020, what is it, 5, to say, well, we ought to start our church worker out with what I was paid 60 years ago. Are you kidding? You can't even buy groceries for that much. We as congregations have set ourselves up for failure in dealing with healthy relationships with many of our church workers. That's why there's guidelines. One of the things that we as district leaders get to do is talk to congregations and say, when you're calling, make sure you know what the district guidelines are and that you have agreed as a congregation to walk in at least to understand those guidelines and choose to walk in them. Because I guarantee you, the church worker is saying, what's cost of living in Charlotte, North Carolina? We were sent a call to Detroit one time, and the pay scale was so low for me, they sent job wanted ads to Sue. So they were saying, we want you to serve as our pastor, but we expect your wife to work. Well, one, they had no idea what our life situation was about, that at that particular time, Sue couldn't, well, still can't, work outside the home because of our needs for Sam. But they were saying, your wife is going to have to work when you move here to Detroit. Well, that was a closed door right away. They didn't even want to have the conversation. So for both parties, worker and congregation and worker, to be on the same page and acknowledge that same pageness is part of the first step in a healthy relationship. For a congregation, when the call committee does have a bunch of 82-year-olds on it, to say, you know, maybe we shouldn't draw from our experience. Maybe we should draw from those resources that are out there to help us give a perspective as to what it's like. Our district guidelines, for instance, for salary, there's a whole table laid out there, and that goes by years of experience. It goes by degree. For pastors, it's a master's of theology is required. And then MDiv, master's in divinity. But then you can go up from there. You have a STM, you can have a THD, a PhD. Well, there's appropriate guidelines then that mark, according to education, there's guidelines that say how many do you have on staff? Is it a solo pastor, or do you have people on staff that you've got to oversee? Well, that's a different kind of pay scale as well. And so if you don't know those things, but are just throwing your opinion up in the air, guarantee you, church workers are looking at that. Now, a teacher's going to say, I've been teaching for 22 years, and I've got a master's degree. But now, yet this school is wanting to pay me at the two-year level of experience. Holy Spirit, what do you want from that? Do you want me to give in to that and take this call, knowing that it's going to be that kind of challenge for my family, or not? It's a both and there that's going on. Just this last week, we had a congregation who is vacant, wants a call list. Their vacancy pastor said, here's the district guidelines for pay, vacation, all of that. You'd be wise to look at that. The congregational president said, we're not going to be told how we should pay our pastor. We're not telling you. These are guidelines for you. Use them for your resource. And he said some other things that caused that vacancy pastor to turn in his resignation on the spot and say, you will not disrespect the office of the pastor or me or our district president. I'm done. You're on your own. And that's what's happening because we're not choosing to work together in some of these ways that are God-glorifying and Spirit-led. And that's sad. So, guess what? 4 or 5 years, that congregation is going to be vacant. And it's a congregation that worships 20 people. What's going to happen over 4 or 5 years? The likelihood of that congregation, it probably will not exist, sadly. Unless, this is the other thing we find, unless they're endowed with $500,000 and they can keep themselves afloat because they've got this money out there. That's the part of the conversation that we go to this congregation and say, wouldn't it be better, wouldn't an option be for you to give that endowment to an entity that can really put that money to use for kingdom expanding ways? There's a congregation in Washington, D.C. of Iriterian immigrants who needs a pastor. How about that? There's a congregation in Meherrin, Virginia, that is the oldest historic black congregation, I think, on the East Coast, or at least in the southeastern district. It has never been able to support a full-time pastor. But they are growing and thriving. And wouldn't it be great to be able to pour some resources in there and say, give this thing let's give you a shot in the arm so you can go from worshiping 70 to 170 and really make an impact in your community. Those kinds of conversations are what, thankfully, we get to have. Sometimes they're received well and sometimes they're not. But at least we get to have the conversation, help people think creatively, spirit-led wise on how to impact the kingdom. Okay. Well, anyway. Yes, Phil. About getting lay people be exercising ministry opportunities? Yeah. Yes. So to answer your question, yes, there are opportunities for that, but I need to clarify it for us. We in the Southeastern District welcome those kinds of creative solutions so that the kingdom can expand and people can be connected to Jesus. We want to do that in ways that operate within our theology and our polity. So one of those ways is we just don't want to, we can't just throw open the gate and say anybody who wants to do this can do it. There's a decency and good order of theology put into practice through our polity. So in order to do that in decency and good order and polity and theology, we in the Southeastern District are really raising up the opportunities for people to be trained lay deacons, male and female. A female lay deacon is not called a deaconess because a deaconess is something totally different. They would be a female lay deacon or male lay deacon. And those lay deacons then are given opportunities to serve in the church in unique ways that maybe they hadn't before because of some training and blessing of the church with that. And also, there's another opportunity called the SMP, the Specialized Ministry Pastor, the SMP program, which allows men to go through the SMP program, Specialized Ministry Pastoring, where they are pastors in their congregation, ordained through this process into the office of the ministry in their congregation for specific purposes. That's why it's specific ministry. So they are set aside as that you are the visitation pastor. You are the one who care for all the people who need the visits. You are the pastor who is in charge of youth and children's ministry, and that's what you do. These are part-time, usually SMPs, at least at the beginning, are part-time positions raised up within the congregation with the appropriate training. SMP pastors cannot leave the district unless the district president signs off on that. So an SMP pastor cannot be called from another district. They could be called from to another congregation within the district, but again, the district president has to have special conversation in that. Usually, SMP pastors work on behalf of the congregation that has raised them up. You, as an SMP pastor, be the one that would do the visits at sites where we have, where we go into communities with our technology, with our service, and you're the face on the ground there. SMP pastors are, as ordained pastors, have the authority to preach and teach and administer the sacraments, just within the boundaries of what SMP means in its broader sense of the church at large. We want to do that in the Southeastern District, lay deacons and SMPs. We are getting a lot of pushback in the larger synod, where there's a group of people that hold the opinion that the lay deacon responsibilities ought to be very narrow. And oftentimes that involves the role of women from this conversation. There are a group of people who also say that the SMP route by which specialized ministry pastors are trained is online. This group will also say the only quality education is residential, where you go to the seminary for 4 years, move your family, give up your career, all that stuff, and then be trained. There's a group who says that. We in the South District are saying no. There's a SMP. I will stand shoulder to shoulder with a strategically ministry pastor as an ordained clergy in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. In fact, I would argue that their training online is even more intense than what I encountered in residential, because of what they're being asked to do and the commitment that comes with that, because it's so intentional of being online. So we're having a lot of conversations with that. Some of that conversation is going some places it's not. It's cause for a lot of dissension among some circles. Among some circles, it's causing a line to be drawn in the sand. And you might see over the next 2 or 3 synodical conventions where we as a church body are headed based out of this issue. We in convention, of which Scott knows, he was there as our congregational representative, we in convention sent to the convention of the LCMS next summer that we want to see the synod continue to move forward with SMP and lay deacon opportunities to serve. We fear it won't even get out of the floor committee, but it'll be omnibused, which means we acknowledge that you sent it in, but we're not going to put it before the convention floor for vote. We're just going to table it. Yep. And it's not old school thinking is a good way to put it, Dave, but they have theological arguments that they will use to back up, and so I don't want to dismiss that group outright. They do have arguments. They do have they can argue from Scripture in some perspectives. What I would ultimately come out though with them is saying, yes, you do have some legitimate points, but you're also being narrow-minded in this for the sake of the mission of the church that also has biblical examples in raising up servants for the harvest that the early church did, that the Old Testament prophets did, that maybe we need to address today. Sure, let's do it well, let's do it. But when in a synod of 5,800 congregations, we have 77 graduates coming out of seminary between the 2 seminaries, the first conversation we ought to have is, why are we having 2 seminaries with all that physical plant? Why don't we combine into 1 seminary? then we can talk about residential, holding up that as the gold standard. That's my perspective. Anyway, so we have a lot of conversation to do. We have a lot of prayer to do with it. It's important for us to hear each other speak in all of this and not just automatically dismiss. But it's also important for us to say, this is where I stand. And I'm going to stand here and convince me otherwise. But do it in brotherly love. Right? Yeah, we want to do that way. Yeah. Phil, does that answer your question? Okay, good. Yeah, you've been there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the nomination process, the electing process is very different. When I was first in the ministry, for a district convention, all of the young pastors, that is the guys who are recent graduates, they all got appointed to be pages for the convention floor. In other words, we got to run around and collect ballots. They were all done by paper ballots. And so you'd have maybe a vote of an office, or you'd have an issue that we were voting on. Sometimes you'd have 5 ballots. Well, you'd have to collect those ballots, run up to the counting, and run back down. It was a lot of work, so that's why they let us young guys do it. Well, now it's all electronic, thank God. You have an electronic device, and it's much more accurate, and yeah, it's different. So, again, technology has made its impact there too. Yeah, Susan? So Susan says 2 things. One is, what's the first thing you said? Are we heading for a break as a synod? That's one thing. Oh, the survival. That's right, survival. Okay, so that's one of the, let's go to the survival first. That's one of the reasons why we as the Southeastern District are saying we need to do something, and we need to do this in the Spirit, creatively, within biblical bounds. Let's think about how we can do that for the sake of the church. We don't want to see congregations close. We want to see them thriving, even if it's 20 people, that they can thrive. How can we help them thrive? We want to do that for the sake of not staying at 20, but expanding the kingdom, so more and more people are connected to Jesus. That's what we want. That's what we're here for, as the mission of the church. How can we do that creatively within theological, biblical, polity bounds? So that's why we're having the conversation. Some people just don't want that conversation. Some people are just not of that mindset, and that's sad. Is it leading to a break? If a I hope not. Let's put it that way. I could say a lot of things about it, but let's just say I hope not. But I will say this. Over the last 30 years of ministry, I always thought that the straw that would break the camel's back for us in the Missouri Synod was going to be the close, closed, or closed issue of communion. I don't think that anymore. I think it's still polarizing. The North Wisconsin district voted in convention that communion is closed. That means only members of that congregation are allowed to commune when communion is offered. So that's what they said as a district. That would not work in the Southeastern District because of the mission field that is ours as compared to different in North Wisconsin. Now, interestingly enough, Pastor Harrison in our convention said some things that are very different from where he's been in the past. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, thank you. That was the most encouraging, I think, presentation that I've heard our leaders say in a long time. Because he was willing to acknowledge that some of these areas are mysteries for us, and we need to act in the gospel with pastoral care when handling these mysteries. And saying that communion is closed is not handling the mysteries in pastoral care or the gospel. But he didn't say that part, but I'm saying that. But, yeah. And in fact, he even used an example from his life in caring for somebody and offering them the supper, and he made the bold statement of saying, would you do that to the convention floor? And there was a pastor who said, no. And President Harrison said, well, that's your problem. Woohoo, good, that's good. That kind of attitude needs to be called on the carpet, and the only one who can call him on the carpet is the synodical president, so good, he did that. Anyway, he did it in love, but he let it be known, that's your problem. That's not a gospel response. That's not the love of Christ that in pastoral care is needed in that moment. Okay. What I think now is that if we're going to split, it's going to come through an issue like how we handle the office of the ministry through the SMP and the training of our pastors. That's what I think it's going to come down to, because there are a group that are adamant that it's only residential. It can only be residential, and anything other than that is cause for whatever. And there's a lot of water that needs to go under any kind of bridge before we start talking about a split. But I think now, in reading if I had to read the tea leaves, that would be that issue. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, the ones I heard that I perked up with, that's, brought up some questions about what the pastors within that Southeast district. I heard that the ones that are against the SMP, like the SMP, what I'm used to is like Mark Moriak. He's a full-fledged pastor, one of the pastors leading that flock. He's not specialized in one mission. He is a pastor at Prince of Peace.
That's right.
And I saw, we were fortunate to see three gentlemen come out that were lifelong Christians, deeply devout men. One was retiring from the Marine Corps, and he went through that program. So these are all people at the end of their careers that felt led to the ministry by the Spirit. And I'm just convinced that, one, the lesson that I took away was we need to be in prayer about this rather than it's real easy for Satan to start driving wedges.
That's right. That's right.
So that's nobody wins.
We don't need wedges.
We just need to be in prayer about it. And the Spirit's going to lead us. We need to get out of his way.
Yeah, that's right.
We did that in our congregation. He called Zelig Allen, you knew him.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But he came and worshiped with us. The Lord was leading him. He thought he was responding to a call in Maryland, and he came up to go to the grocery store, which is right beside Prince of Peace.
Yeah.
And met John Denninger there.
Yep.
Well, the Spirit wound up using him as a vehicle that the Spirit could start an Ethiopian congregation there that grew by leaps and bounds.
That's right.
We had nothing to do with
No.
it.
Let the Spirit do his work.
We were convinced that our ministry was supposed to be the first generation Korean Americans. And we tried to do it on our own, and it kept failing. And let's do more on our own, and it kept failing more. And then, Lord, all of a sudden, Zelig was sitting in the narthex.
Yep.
And the Spirit made that happen entirely without us.
The uniqueness about the SMP program is that unlike a guy like me or my dad who went through the system, the residential training, when you come out of the seminary, the synod has an expectation, and we, as graduates, have an expectation that this is going to be my calling is my career, and I'm going to be a full-time pastor until I retire or die, whatever. That's kind of the expectation. What the SMP program allows for is to say, we need you in a specialized ministry, and maybe you're going to be volunteer. Maybe it's part-time, paid, but maybe later on, the door will open for you to be a full-time pastor, church worker, if the opportunity is there. It gives us flexibility. Out of 5,800 congregations, 1,100 600 are vacant, and you could do the breakdown in there between full-time senior pastor, sole pastor, associate pastor breakdown. But 500 of the 1,100 congregations are being served by part-time pastors. Some of those pastors want to be part-time, some of them don't want to be, but that's where they have to be right now. And so one of the conversations that we're having too with congregations that are calling and with those who are being called is, how open are you to being a worker priest, of having an outside job and then serving your congregation? Boundaries need to be very clear there, because you can be working a 40-hour job and then the congregation expect you to be a 40-hour job also, but paying you part-time. But you got to find balance in there, right? So anyway, those are conversations that are having. The SMP allows for that, where somebody can serve a congregation part-time while still maintaining their career or whatnot. The guy that I referred to in the message today who said, we're okay with that. That's why I like the Missouri Synod, Lutheranism. He was interviewed for an SMP, to start the SMP process, to enter seminary as an SMP potential pastor. But he doesn't need to work full time. He's got pension and retirement from various professions that he doesn't have to rely on the office of the ministry to pay for groceries on the table and a mortgage and whatever. So wonderful, great. I had a great interview with him. Great guy. I really appreciate. And one of the questions he had for me was, where's the SMP program going and how will I be received? And I told him, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as we are concerned in the Southeastern District, when you graduate, I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you as an ordained clergy of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, equal. And no questions asked. Well, some are not feeling that way, thinking that way. So, more conversation, and like Scott said, lots of prayer. Opportunities for us as the church to lean into the Lord, right? Lean in that spirit, trust in Him, but also for us as a congregation to continue what we're doing. Stay focused on the mission, the main thing why we exist, share the life and love of Jesus Christ with all, to celebrate the fellowship that we share together as God's people in the unity of the Spirit, and to continue to be a place where people, sinful human beings, are welcomed so that they can know the love of Jesus just like you and I celebrate. Amen. Friends, we didn't get to. You got a question, Tom? No, yeah. So thanks for asking that question. So I was just going to comment on how we didn't get into the fifth vision today. But yeah, I like doing these kinds of conversations where we can ask questions, whether it's about a certain topic or not. Today it happened to be, we happen to lean into a certain topic. But yeah, no, I'm not opposed to that, having an opportunity to discuss kind of what's out there and where are we and what do we need to do. I'd love that, yeah. Because part of what we need to be today is informed, so that we can be in prayer about these things and seeking the Lord, where's my place in all of this, so that I can be an agent of the gospel. Yeah, happy to do that. Right, exactly. Fat, dumb, and happy just makes us fat, dumb, and happy. Yeah. So what is this? June, July, August, September, maybe September, October, we can do this again? Yeah, but I'm happy to do that. We'll be in fifth vision next week. I promise. We'll get into the fifth vision next week, okay? If you have any questions or concerns or things that I talked about today that are not clear or disconcerting to you, please email me, call me. don't let it sit out there and fester. Let's talk about it, okay? For you online as well.
One thing the church needs to keep in mind is the welcoming presence.
Yes.
And I was thinking about what you were saying about the communion thing, because when we were looking for a church in Houston, we went to Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, and they actually came up to us when we came in, we're doing communion today, but you won't be able to participate. Now, how...
Closed.
You go back to that church.
Right, right.
But how welcome
Right.
do you feel worshiping with those folks when that is the attitude that they have when you walk in as a guest?
Right. I had in a mission start in Ohio. I had a group of people who were of the mentality, they would stand in the parking lot, and when people got out of their cars, they would ask them, not if they're believers, not if they know Jesus as Savior, are you Missouri Synod? Because we're having communion today. And if you're not allowed to commune. Well, what did they do? They got back in their cars and left. We didn't even have a conversation together. Boy, I raked them across the coals. And then in fact, they ended up leaving. They left. They ended up leaving because the district president had to come in and say, you guys are gone. Pastor Bohlmann's doing what he's supposed to be doing. You keep on, Tim. You guys are gone. Yeah, that was ugly time. That was a hard time in ministry. But I had a resource to draw on to help with that, and we moved on in mission then in that congregation. Yeah, Bethany. That's right. Now, there's pastoral care involved with this, right? On the one hand, we just don't throw open the gates and say, hey, anybody can commune. No. If you don't know Jesus, if you're an unbeliever, if you're a part of a religious organization that is not Christian or is not Trinitarian, we ought not to. But we want to have a conversation with you. And even if you're a member of another Christian congregation, but you've got questions, well, let's talk about this. If you do come to communion, then I have the responsibility under pastoral care to talk with you about it afterwards and say, hey, where are you in all of this? This is where we are. Are we in agreement? We understand that there's power in this means of grace that can damage as well as save. So let's converse about this. So we have responsibility. I don't want to make it, none of us want to make it seem like it's just open, but we want to be inviting as well in that pastoral care, biblical understanding of the supper being the sacrament. Yep. Yep. Yeah, Barbara. So on the back of the welcoming cards in the pew pocket in front of you is our statement of communion. That is district approved. All right, it's not just me writing that and saying this is what I want us to do. This was vetted by the district president and said, yep, that's great, that's beautiful, share it. So we have a statement that you can draw people to. Hey, this is what we believe. If you believe this, come on, and pastor will talk to you about it. But if you don't believe this, well, then also know that maybe there's some conversations we ought to have before you take communion. Okay, it gives us boundaries to operate in, relationship to operate in. There's something else you said. I forgot what it was. Go ahead. Yeah. Yep. You know, and absolutely. And maybe one of the things that we can have a conversation with concerning our greeter ministry is that all the greeters have one of those cards in their hands, so that when a new person comes in, you can hand it to them. Hey, can you fill this information out? We'd like to make contact with you, so they have it. And then, oh, by the way, we're communing this Sunday. Take a look at this as we gather for communion. That we can be doing that right in our ministry together. Yeah, Donna. Sure, sure. So, and that's one of the blessings that this congregation has. Let's take Tom, for example. Tom has the nudging of the Spirit saying, maybe I'd like to investigate pastoral ministry. Got a job, and he's working. Okay, fine. SMP allows him to take classes at night. I think there is a requirement for 2 weeks on campus once a year, twice a year. I think Fort Wayne is twice a year. St. Louis is once a year. Anyway, he's still working. He's getting his training, and then when he's done and he graduates, he's an ordained pastor of the Missouri Synod with a specialized ministry program that we can plug him into then somewhere here at Bethany. Absolutely, and he could still keep his full-time job, just be serving then in that role as an SMP. What do you think, Tom? That's open for all, any of us, as we understand the ministry to be for males, right? But the lay deacon program is available for anybody, male and female, to get some specialized training in service for the Lord and His church. Yep, yep. No. Well, one of the things that's neat about the SMP program is and the lay deacon program too, is you're put into what's called cohorts, a group of about 5 people, and you become accountable to one another in conversation, in homework, in what you're studying, and all of that. That really is a support group while you're journeying through either the lay deacon or the SMP program. I wish I would have had that at seminary. I did not. I can tell you about my seminary experience sometime. We don't have time today, unless you want to hear it now. But anyway, yeah, I share that with y'all sometime. Okay. All right. Thanks, friends. We got a barbecue to go to for Father's Day. Yeah, grandkids are coming over. I really would like a nap, but I think I have to cook burgers first. Anyway, blessings to you and whatever you're doing today and this week. We'll see you Wednesday out at Trinity if you're able to come. 7 o'clock out there. Next Sunday for sure. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. We'll be back together again for Bible study next week. Amen.